Hello, hello. Barbara Salmeron here, and welcome to my Tuesday tips for Rockin' relationships. We are on episode 12, and thank you for joining us. We are talking today about a topic that is coming up with some of my coaching clients, and it's that topic of perfectionism. And so not only do I coach relationships, but I also coach on weight loss and personal growth. And so something that I see coming up again and again for my clients is this idea of perfectionism. And why do I see that in others? Because there's a saying, if you spot it, you got it. And we can't really see these qualities in other people unless we also have that in ourselves at some level. And maybe we're trying to deny that or suppress that, or we can spot something in others that we might be codependently drawn to try to heal for them. It's a whole nother topic that we can talk about in the future. But for me, my perfectionism shows up around productivity. So if I don't get as much done in a day that I think I should have gotten done, then I beat myself up about it. Now, be careful about the words should and shouldn't, because they're always a judgment. We're always judging ourselves or others when we hear ourselves saying the words should or shouldn't. There's a quote from Wayne Dyer that I read years ago that I love. It says, "The only difference between a weed and a flower is judgment." And when I first read that, I thought, no, that's different. That's not true, because a flower is beautiful and a weed is horrible and invasive. And I caught myself, wow, those are both judgments. Judging a flower as beautiful, judging a weed as bad or destructive. So whenever we judge something as good or bad, or it should be this way, or it shouldn't be that way, they shouldn't be doing this thing, it is a judgment. So that's a bonus tip for today. But in my case, as with many of you, perhaps, the problem is not about being less than perfect. The problem is that we beat ourselves up about being less than perfect, which then leads to shame and guilt. And we're going to talk about those today too, because they are so destructive and they do not move us in the direction of our goals. Okay, so for today's talk, I went to dictionary.com to look up the definition of perfectionism. And so dictionary.com defines perfectionism first as a noun. It's a refusal to accept any standard short of perfection. And then it goes further. As a philosophy, it's considered or defined as a doctrine holding that religious, moral, social, or political perfection is attainable, and especially the theory that human or moral, spiritual perfection should be or has been attained. So that's a mouthful, right? This philosophy of perfection. So I just want to say right now, there is no such thing as perfection in the human experience. Now, as I was researching for this talk today, this concept of perfection, of course, you know, when I go to the Google machine, all sorts of amazing articles pop up. And I've put the links to those articles in the text for this video. So just look above or below the video somewhere, you'll find the links to these articles. So one of them, Wikipedia, in the psychology version, someone asked, is perfectionism a mental illness? And what Wikipedia has to say about that is perfectionism is a risk factor for obsessive compulsive disorder, also obsessive compulsive personality disorder, eating disorders, social anxiety, social phobia, body dysmorphic disorder, which is I'm too short, I'm too tall, I'm too thin, I'm too fat, I'm too old, I'm too whatever. That's body dysmorphic disorder, workaholism, self-harm, substance abuse, clinical depression, as well as physical problems like chronic stress and heart disease. Perfectionism. right? Which so often is considered to be a good thing, or a good virtue, right? A very valiant and respectable thing. Perfectionism can cause all of these things. Another article that I found on Inc.com talks about being a type of perfectionist can contribute to serious health problems, including depression, anxiety, eating disorders, fatigue, and even early mortality. So you can actually stress yourself into an early grave over trying to be perfect. The author of this article goes on to say that perfectionism can lead to a paralyzing and a procrastination induced fear. I don't know if you've heard of perfectionism. And if our aspirations are so high that we can never possibly meet them or attain them, then it's not going to be good for our productivity or our mental health. Now, in this particular article, again on Inc.com, she talks about there's two types of perfectionism. One is having high standards, which is great for achievement, and the other one is having impossibly high standards, setting ourselves for constant failure. Another article that I found to be perfectionists, prone to overthinking, and we enjoy, I'm an introvert myself actually, so we enjoy concentrating deeply and working alone and getting things just right. But perfectionism isn't just for introverts. Extroverts can be perfectionists too. And so what that can look like is we can feel exhausted and stressed without even knowing why, because we've got this mantra running in our mind that it has to be perfect. So a lot of experts believe that perfectionism begins in childhood, and in early life, a perfectionist starts to believe that people value them based on how much they can achieve or accomplish. And then their self-esteem becomes tied to other people's approval. And if we leave this unchecked in our life, perfectionism can actually poison our health, our mood, and our relationships. There was a study done where self-described perfectionists actually have a 51% higher death rate than non-perfectionists. Fascinating, right? Hardly worth it. So some signs that you might be a perfectionist could include being a workaholic, having to have everything exactly just right, that analysis paralysis, being a person who is black and white thinking, that is a sign of perfectionism. And then, of course, it can also lead to depression and anxiety. So I have some examples for you on perfectionism that I have seen in my life and with my clients. Perhaps setting a goal, like if you want to set a goal to meditate every day or eat healthy every day. Those goals rely on perfectionism. It's like, really? Are you gonna do that perfectly every single day, 365 days a year? I don't know about you, but whenever I've set a daily goal for myself, I've failed at it. And that's okay. We're going to talk about failing forward and how we can expect failure and use it to refocus ourselves. Because there's really no such thing as perfection, not in the human experience. And this kind of perfectionism of trying to do something every single day really just can set us up for failure. So with my coaching clients, I help them arrange their goals so they're setting themselves up for success instead of failure. Now, you can set your goal to eat healthy 95% of the time. For me, I eat healthy most of the time and 1 meal per week. I have whatever I want, the less healthy food. Or you can set your goal to, if you want to meditate every day, set a goal to meditate 7 times per week for X number of minutes, whatever that number is for you. It doesn't matter really if it's 5 minutes or if it's 2 hours, wherever you're at with a meditation practice. But 7 times per week, because that way when you forget a day, and that will happen, you'll have a day that's so busy and you'll fall into bed and you won't realize that you've I had a little internet glitch there. Sorry, I don't know how that turned out. But so we were talking about setting a goal, and rather than saying I want to meditate, every single day, we could set a goal of meditating 7 times a week for whatever number of minutes. And that way, when you forget a day, and that will happen where you'll be so busy and you'll fall into bed and you won't even realize until the next day that you forgot to meditate yesterday. It's happened to me more than once. So believe me, that happens. But that way, if your goal is to meditate 7 times in 1 week, then some other day during the week, you can just meditate twice that day and you've still met your goal. But trying to eat healthy 100% of the time, or meditate every single day, or whatever your goal is, goals that are set up like that just set us up for failure. Okay. And so we can expect that we won't do it perfectly, and we can expect that to happen. And when it does, it doesn't need to crush our goal or our self-esteem. There's some great books around this. One is called Failing Forward by John Maxwell. I highly recommend that book. And another book called Loving What Is by Byron Katie. I know I've mentioned her before, and her website is thework.org. And she has a great philosophy on looking at how to get out of perfectionism. So if we set our goals the right way, then a minor setback or minor deviation is not going to be a problem. What is the problem is beating ourselves up over it, thinking that we should have been perfect. It's always an impossible goal to attain. And there's that word again, should, right? So stop shoulding all over yourself. Now that leads to the topic of shame. When we feel I should have done this better, I should have done that, I shouldn't have had an internet glitch right in the middle of my video. I don't even know what if this video is going to turn out, but that's okay. We'll keep going anyways. So this concept of shame, again, I went to dictionary.com to look up the definition of shame, and it is described or defined as a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by the consciousness or wrong, foolish behavior. Now, there's some interesting things when it comes to shame. And I found an article on goodtherapy.org. And again, the link will be in the description for this video. And that article talks about how shame has the potential to change the way we see ourselves and can lead to many long-lasting social, professional, and even in the bedroom difficulties. Now, there is a difference between embarrassment, shame, and guilt. Embarrassment deals with some sort of a societal reaction. So like farting in public and being embarrassed about it, okay? Guilt is a little deeper. Guilt is usually negative feelings about a specific act, something that we've done, maybe lying to our boss or something like that, eating that food that was off of our plan. We feel guilty about that. And then shame, on the other hand, involves deeper negative feelings about ourselves specifically. And it can be very, very internal, but it can also be external, like the public shaming that we see happening on social media. Sometimes I think it should be called anti-social media, the way that people go off on each other sometimes. But this concept of shame, when it's left unresolved, can again lead to depression and anxiety and low self-esteem. And shame can also be a symptom of a mental health diagnosis, like, again, the body dysmorphia, too fat, too skinny, too tall, too short, too old, too bald, whatever. There's an endless list of the body dysmorphia. Or shame can also be the result of a traumatic experience. And there are many other different causes of shame, including cultural norms, low self-esteem, religious conditioning, as well as trauma or abuse. And so just like with perfectionism, for some people, these feelings of shame might begin in childhood and continue well into adulthood. And people can be conscious of these feelings of shame, or they might be completely unaware of their internal shame and hide it under behaviors such as addiction or narcissism. So some people also risk engaging in self-harm. But I want to say something to you that I learned from my mentor. Only good people feel shame. Let that sink in. Only good people feel shame. It means that you have a moral compass that narcissists and sociopaths do not have. And that's a whole nother topic. That's due to the wiring in their brain and a lack of wiring that cause a lack of a consciousness. So you have a moral compass if you're someone who feels shame. So the next time that perfectionism brings up feelings of shame or guilt, or this need to be perfect, or that you should have done it better, or that you shouldn't have done that, do yourself a favor and just let it go. Because we all fall short sometimes, and we don't need to risk our health and our mental well-being over it. We can learn to laugh at failure and forgive ourselves and learn from it. We can take a situation and say, okay, what happened? What caused me to fall short that day? And what can I learn from it? And what will I do different next time? So we can actually celebrate failure and move forward and benefit from it rather than being devastated by it. Because shame and guilt never, ever move us in the direction of our goals or our dreams. They cause us to withdraw and sometimes even give up on our goals. And then that nasty little voice in our head becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But it doesn't have to. We can practice failing forward and forgiving ourselves for being human. Remember that we are all perfectly imperfect in our own way, and we are all very special and unique. So that's what I have today on perfectionism and shame. I hope that you found some value on that and you can find ways to forgive yourself. I do have some of my classes posted for sale now at grow.barbarasalmeron.com, and you can get your first class with me half off. They're already very affordable, but if you just use the code half off, then you can go and enjoy one of my classes for a very reasonable price. And if you want to submit your most burning relationship questions confidentially, you can go here, qa.empoweredrelationships.org. I don't need your email address or your name. Submit your confidential relationship questions and I can answer them on an upcoming video. I do these Tuesday at noon Central Time, and my live broadcast you can find at youtubelive.barbarasalmeron.com. And also I simulcast at the same time in my Facebook group, which is free for anyone to join. It's called Empowered Relationships to End the Battle. So feel free to join us next time. And by the way, you'll notice sometimes I'm imperfect. Sometimes I start late. Sometimes I skip a week. Like last week, I just didn't feel like it, and I had to forgive myself for that. I was a little under the weather, and I just didn't feel like getting on video. So that's okay. It's okay to be imperfect. So thank you again for watching today, and I hope that we will see you next time. Thank you.